Welcome to Beneath the Surface, the Dark Side of Crime. In today's gripping episode, we dive deep into a chilling millionaire murder mystery that will leave you questioning everything. This case is a web of deceit, greed, and betrayal. But the most shocking part of all, could it have been a family affair? Join me as we unravel the tangled threads of this mystery and discover the truth that will blow your mind. Chapter 1. The millionaire's world, Victor. Harrington's name was etched into the fabric of Ravenswood Hills, an exclusive neighborhood that thrived on luxury and opulence. From the grand oak doors of his mansion to the sleek sports cars parked in the driveway, everything about Victor screamed wealth and success. At 53, he had built his empire from the ground up. He was the founder of Harrington Enterprises, one of the most influential tech companies in the country, with a multi-billion-dollar valuation. He wasn't just rich, he was a symbol of the American dream. Victor's wife, Cecilia, had always been a picture-perfect partner to match his success. Born into modest means, she had climbed the social ladder and eventually earned the title of Ravenswood Hills Philanthropist-in-Chief, always hosting glamorous charity galas and giving speeches about her passion for helping the less fortunate. Beneath the surface, however, Cecilia's charity work seemed more like a mask for something deeper, something she was desperate to hide. Their children, Elena and Marcus, couldn't have been more different from each other. Elena, the 25-year-old daughter, had always been the rebel of the family, constantly clashing with Victor's high expectations. She had attended prestigious universities, but her true passion lay in painting and sculpture, not business or academics. To her father, she was a disappointment, a loose end in the perfect family tapestry he had meticulously crafted. Marcus, on the other hand, was the golden child. At 27, he had completed an Ivy League education, joined the family business, and had all the right connections. On the surface, he was everything a father could hope for, but beneath his charming exterior lay a dark side. Marcus had a gambling problem and a penchant for risky investments, and it was becoming clear that Victor had been quietly distancing himself from his son, but not without consequences. As Detective Karen Montgomery began her investigation, she couldn't help but wonder, could it have been the perfect life that drove one of these family members to murder? Could it be that Victor had been holding his family together with lies and threats, with wealth serving as both a shield and a weapon? All the answers lay within the walls of his mansion, in the tangled lives of those he loved most. Chapter 2. The discovery. It was an unusually cold evening when Victor's body was found. The house, which had once been a beacon of light in the otherwise quiet neighborhood, felt hollow and lifeless. Cecilia was the one who found him, slumped over his mahogany desk in the study, a single gunshot wound to the head. The room was eerily still, save for the faint glow of the fireplace and the smell of expensive cologne that lingered in the air. Detective Karen Montgomery arrived at the scene within hours, her sharp eyes quickly scanning the room. Victor's body was perfectly positioned, almost as if he had been sitting there, waiting for something, perhaps expecting someone. The gun was found on the desk, but there were no signs of a struggle, no signs of forced entry. The house's alarm system had not been tampered with. Everything seemed too controlled. Cecilia, sitting in the corner of the room, was visibly distraught, her tear-streaked face a picture of grief. But Karen couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Cecilia seemed almost too composed, too ready to play the grieving widow. "What happened?" Karen asked, her voice low but direct. I found him like this," Cecilia said, her voice trembling. "I don't know how it happened." Karen nodded but didn't buy it. She had seen too many cases like this before. The perfect crime scene, the perfect widow. The signs were there if you knew where to look. As the investigation continued, Karen discovered that Victor's life wasn't as perfect as it appeared. His marriage had been on the rocks for years. He and Cecilia had been living in separate wings of the house, each leading their own lives, but no one knew the full extent of the problems in the Harrington home. And then there were the children. Elena, the daughter who had fallen out of favor with her father after years of rebellion, and Marcus, who had been fighting his own demons. Was it possible that one of them, tired of living in their father's shadow, decided to end it all? Chapter 3. The Family Secrets. The more Karen dug into the Harrington family's past, the more she uncovered layers of tension, lies, and broken promises. Cecilia was a woman of many faces. To the world, she was the loving wife, the perfect mother, the philanthropist who gave away millions. But behind closed doors, she had been hiding a dark secret. The first clue came from the family's finances. Karen discovered that Victor had recently cut Cecilia off. She had been living in a lavish lifestyle funded by her husband's wealth, but a week before his death, he had signed a legal document severing their financial ties. The divorce was set to be finalized, but that wasn't all. Victor had made it clear that he would be leaving his fortune to charity, leaving his wife and children with almost nothing. But it wasn't just Cecilia who had a motive. Elena had been cut out of her father's will years ago, and her financial troubles were no secret. She had accumulated a massive amount of credit card debt, and her attempts to reach out to her father for help had been met with harsh rejection. Her resentment toward him had been building for years, and now, with his death, Elena stood to inherit his business and fortune, if only she could prove herself to be the rightful heir. And then there was Marcus, the golden boy who had never truly felt the weight of his father's expectations until recently. Victor's decision to withhold his trust fund from Marcus had been the final straw. Marcus had been gambling heavily, using the family's name to secure loans and make risky bets, only to fall into deeper debt. He had begged his father for one more chance, but Victor refused to budge. The deeper Karen investigated, the clearer it became. Victor's family was on the verge of collapse, and each member had their own reason for wanting him gone. Could one of them have pushed things too far? Chapter 4. The Lover's Confession. The breakthrough came when a woman named Lena appeared at the police station, her eyes filled with guilt. Lena, a young artist, had been in a secret affair with Victor for several months. She claimed that Victor had promised to leave his wife and children, and they had even discussed running away together. But Victor's plan had been more complicated than she had realized. He had confided in Lena that he intended to announce the affair and separate from Cecilia, but he was also planning to protect his family's legacy by cutting them off financially. Lena's confession sent shockwaves through the family. Elena, already fragile and resentful, was furious at her father's betrayal. To her, this affair was another example of how Victor had always been unkind and unfair to her. But even more disturbing was the realization that Lena had no reason to lie. Victor's affair with her wasn't just about love, it was about something deeper, something that threatened everything the Harringtons had built. Karen was now convinced that one of Victor's children, or perhaps even Cecilia herself, might have been the one to murder him. But who? Chapter 5. The Hidden Motive. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Karen uncovered Victor's secret will. The will had been revised just days before his death. While the public believed that the estate would go to his wife and children, the reality was far different. Victor had been quietly funneling large sums of money into an overseas charity for years, hiding the true scope of his wealth from everyone. In the document, Victor made it clear that Cecilia and the children would receive only a fraction of his fortune. The rest was earmarked for his charity, money that would go to building tech programs for underprivileged communities worldwide. But in his will, Victor also made a stipulation. If anyone tried to contest the will or fight for the inheritance, they would be disinherited completely. The clue was now clear. Victor's family felt betrayed by the man they had once loved. Could the financial stakes have been the final push that drove one of them to murder? Chapter 6. Uncovering the Past. Detective Karen Montgomery delved deeper into Victor's past. She found herself piecing together a history of betrayal and secrets. While his business empire seemed spotless on the surface, Karen soon discovered a darker side to Victor's dealings, one that involved shady investments and under-the-table deals with criminals. Victor's success had not come purely from hard work, but from calculated risk-taking and some morally gray decisions that he had buried away from public view. Karen's breakthrough came when she met Gavin Taylor, a former business partner who had been in the trenches with Victor during the early days of Harrington Enterprises. Gavin was now a shadow of his former self, an aging man who seemed to have lost his zest for life. But when Karen sat down with him, something changed. Gavin seemed almost relieved to share his story. He explained that Victor had been involved in a risky investment deal over a decade ago, a deal that had gone horribly wrong. In a desperate bid to cover up the failed venture, Victor had made a series of backroom deals with underworld figures, essentially trading secrets for protection. These actions had haunted Victor, and he had confided in Gavin that, should the truth ever come to light, it would destroy everything he had built. Karen's heart raced. This was the key to everything. Victor had been blackmailing someone within his family, and it was clear that whoever was involved wanted to protect themselves. The investigation had suddenly shifted focus. Was it possible that Marcus, who had been involved in some questionable financial dealings, had uncovered the truth and taken matters into his own hands? Or was it Elena, who had been shut out of the family's wealth, trying to find a way to take back control? Chapter 7. The Dangerous Game Detective. Karen Montgomery couldn't shake the feeling that the answers to Victor's death weren't just hidden within the walls of the mansion, but also in the relationships that surrounded him. She had already spoken to Elena, the rebellious daughter, and Marcus, the frustrated son, but it was time to dig deeper into Raymond, Elena's boyfriend. Raymond was a man of mystery. He had no job, no solid background, yet he was always seen in the company of Elena. His charm was undeniable, but there was something about him that seemed off. After several hours of questioning, it became clear to Karen that Raymond wasn't just a passive bystander. He was a key player in this whole scenario. Elena had confided in Raymond that she felt trapped, frustrated by her father's control over her life, and burdened by the disinheritance. Raymond, ever the opportunist, saw an opening. He convinced Elena that her father's refusal to help her financially, his coldness, and his indifference to her needs were reasons enough to take drastic action. Raymond planted seeds of doubt in Elena's mind, manipulating her feelings of rejection and resentment into a dangerous cocktail of anger. "Your father doesn't care about you. You're just a pawn in his game. But I can help you get what's yours," Raymond whispered to Elena on multiple occasions. As Karen uncovered more of their interactions, it became clear that Raymond was using Elena's vulnerability to push her into actions that would benefit him. His charm masked a more sinister motive. Raymond wanted control over the Harrington fortune. He had no love for Elena, no desire to be a part of her family. He was using her as a means to an end, a stepping stone toward his own wealth. But the true turning point came when Karen found out that Raymond had been in contact with Marcus. The two had met several times in secret, discussing the growing tension in the family and the inheritance issue. In one particularly damning conversation, Raymond had suggested, "You could have everything you want if you help me with one simple thing." Marcus had been financially desperate for months. His failed business, mounting debt, and gambling problems left him in a precarious position. Raymond had promised Marcus that if he helped eliminate Victor, he could secure his own future, a future of wealth and freedom. But Marcus wasn't the mastermind. Raymond had expertly manipulated him, using his desperation to make him believe that Victor was the cause of all his problems. It was too tempting for Marcus to resist. He needed the money more than he needed his family. As Karen pieced this together, the web of deceit became clearer. Raymond had played both siblings like puppets in his quest for power. Elena, the pawn who sought freedom from her father's control, and Marcus, the desperate son who craved financial security, had both been unknowingly drawn into Raymond's dangerous game. They had all been complicit in the murder, but Raymond's role as the puppet master could not be ignored. Chapter 8. The Shocking Revelation. Just when Karen thought she had uncovered the heart of the conspiracy, Marcus made a shocking confession, and it would change everything. Sitting in a sterile interrogation room, Marcus appeared broken, his facade of the golden sun finally crumbling. The tears that fell from his eyes were not of grief for his father, but for the weight of his guilt. "I never thought it would go this far," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "Raymond promised me everything. He told me if we killed Victor, I'd finally be free. He convinced me that the only way out was to take him down." Karen leaned forward, eager to hear more. Marcus's confession revealed something deeper, something Karen hadn't anticipated. "I found out about his illegal dealings, the blackmail, the arms deals. I thought that if I exposed it, I'd destroy everything. Raymond promised to help me, and Marcus cut himself off, choking on his words. "I didn't know he'd go this far." The revelation hit Karen like a freight train. Victor had been blackmailing his son. When Marcus had discovered the truth about his father's past, the shady business dealings, the financial manipulations, the secrets, it had destroyed him. Victor had told Marcus to stay silent, threatening to expose his son's gambling problem to the public. The idea of being disowned, of losing everything, had terrified Marcus, and Raymond had taken advantage of that fear. But Raymond's manipulation didn't end there. He had painted a picture of freedom and wealth, making Marcus believe that he could escape from his father's shadow and live a life without restrictions. And in his vulnerability, Marcus had believed him. Marcus's words were a damning indictment of both Raymond and his own actions. He confessed that, on the night of Victor's murder, he had been a willing accomplice. Raymond had been the one to suggest how to kill Victor, a clean shot to the head, making sure it looked like a robbery gone wrong. "I didn't know how much power Raymond had over me until it was too late," Marcus admitted, his face pale. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see it all. I've destroyed my family." Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. With Marcus's confession in hand, Karen felt that she was closing in on the truth. The pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to fit together. But there was one more person to confront: Cecilia Harrington. Cecilia had been the mastermind behind much of the scheme, but she had never been as forthcoming as Marcus. She had been the one who orchestrated the murder, manipulating her children into believing it was their only way out. In a tense confrontation in her luxurious living room, Karen watched as Cecilia's carefully constructed facade began to crack. "I didn't want it to end like this," Cecilia whispered, her hands trembling in her lap. "I loved Victor once, but the lies, the betrayal, he was never the man I thought he was." Karen's eyes narrowed. Cecilia had been playing a dangerous game of her own, trying to secure her position within the family's wealth. She had manipulated Victor, used him, and when he threatened to cut her off financially, she had panicked. Cecilia had pushed her children into a corner, convincing them that their inheritance depended on Victor's death. But the truth was more complicated. Cecilia had feared that if Victor's secrets came to light, her own role in his illegal dealings would be exposed. She had been financially dependent on Victor for years, and without him, she would lose everything. So, she had turned to Raymond, who promised her that he could fix everything. "I thought I was protecting my family," Cecilia sobbed. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt, but once we started down that path, there was no turning back." Karen's heart ached as she watched the woman break down. But the law was clear. Cecilia was responsible for the murder, even if she had been manipulated by Raymond. She had been the one who had made the fateful decision to kill her husband to secure her children's future, no matter the cost. Chapter 10. The Truth Comes Out. The truth was finally laid bare for all to see. Elena, manipulated by Raymond, had been an unwitting accomplice in the murder, but she had not been the mastermind. Marcus, desperate to escape his father's control and secure his future, had been the one to pull the trigger, with Raymond pulling the strings behind the scenes. Cecilia had orchestrated the entire plot, believing that eliminating Victor was the only way to protect her family's wealth. The fallout was immense. Raymond was arrested and charged with murder, conspiracy, and manipulation, while Marcus was charged as an accessory to the crime. Cecilia, though she had claimed to be a victim of Raymond's deceit, was also arrested for her role in the murder plot. Elena, though devastated, was spared prosecution. She had been caught in the crossfire of her family's greed, and it was clear that her emotional manipulation by Raymond was central to the tragedy. However, her life would never be the same. The Harrington family was shattered, their empire destroyed not by an outside force, but from within. In the final moments, Karen reflected on the case. Greed, deception, and the desire for control had turned a family against itself. The lesson was simple but haunting. No matter how much wealth or power we accumulate, we can never escape the consequences of our choices. Beneath the surface, the dark side of crime. Thank you for joining us as we uncovered the shocking truth behind the Millionaire murder mystery. This case is a tragic reminder of how greed and betrayal can destroy everything, even the closest of families. The lesson here is clear. We must never allow the pursuit of power to blind us to the value of integrity and trust. Stay tuned for more stories from Beneath the Surface, the dark side of crime.